and you'll receive a copy of that recording. Some of our presenters today will also be sharing their presentation. Unfortunately, a few are not, but the majority are. And so we'll get those to you sometime in the near future. Thank you again for joining us. And I'd like to turn it over now to Barbara. Barbara, welcome. I'll unmute you. Yes. Are you able to unmute yourself, Barbara?
Yes, now I can unmute.
Okay,
sorry,
perfect.
I wasn't.
Yes,
thanks, Nikki. It's so wonderful to see everyone. Thank you all for coming to the presentation. And yeah, we're going to talk about social media data, and I'm really excited. So let me share my screen. Oh, sorry, Nikki, you got to let me share my screen too. It looks like it's not letting me do that. And I know that I think, Nikki, you muted everyone, which is totally fine. But I usually do say to people, if you have a question, you can call out. But in this case, if everyone's muted, you can just use the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on it.
Are you able to share now, Barbara? I can also monitor the questions.
Okay, great. And yes, I can. Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. Take it away.
All right. So yeah, I kind of in this presentation go over, I think I'm calling it 101, but I think it's a relatively deep dive. And Nikki, we have 50 minutes, right? About an hour. Yeah, to go through a bunch of different stuff related to social media data. And let me start by introducing myself further, and then I kind of want to hear who's in the room too. I'm Barb. You can call me Barb. I'm the president of Boxplot Analytics, which is a certified women-owned business. It's a little bit about that on the next slide. I have a bachelor's in statistics. I do have years of experience in this industry. That's all I've done is statistics and math. And I do love being outdoors and gardening, and I'm located in Philadelphia. And my business, like I said, is certified. We're a women-owned business. And that's all we do is data, analytics, dashboards. We just work with data all day and help businesses and other organizations, nonprofits, whoever, make smarter decisions using their data instead of trying to guess or using intuition, or, kind of where the world is moving away from that kind of stuff. So I'd love to hear who's in the room. And I obviously know we can't do introductions for every person. So maybe just in the chat, if you could drop the size of the company you are with right now. I imagined it might be a lot of smaller companies coming to this presentation, but I could be wrong. So yeah, I'd love to hear a number of employees that work at your organization. I'll just take a look at the chat here to get a feel for even the size of companies being represented. Okay, 16. Okay. 2. Yep. Great. Hi. Solo. Okay. Maybe just wait for a couple more people. Yeah. 1. Yeah. And this is about what I was expecting, which is great. So, yep. Perfect. 11. Okay. Yeah. These are about the numbers I was expecting. So yeah, I would say this presentation is more tailored to smaller businesses, which Boxplot is as well. And how do you kind of use your social media data as a small business, right? The larger companies, obviously the really large ones have oodles and oodles of employees and tools doing this, right? So this is more tailored to what do you do if you don't have that, and how do you kind of just get started? So we're going to cover where is the valuable data, how do I start collecting and using this data, review common social media platforms. I've looked at quite a few of the top ones, like in depth with their data, so I'll go over that. And then for those of you who do have access to the data already or are planning on getting it, how do you use it? What common tools can you use for analyzing it? And then finally, just a little bit of pitfalls of what can go wrong with analysis in general. What do you want to avoid doing? Because your analysis will be pretty useless to your business if it's wrong, right? So we don't want that. So I'll start with a quote from one of my favorite books. I'm sure many of you have heard of this book, The E-Myth Revisited. You cannot ask too many questions about the numbers. Without the numbers, you can't possibly know where you are, let alone where you're going. It really is so important to have the data for your business, not just for social media. I mean, this presentation is focused on social media, but you can imagine how valuable it could be to have the data for other parts of your business, other marketing pieces, if you're a larger organization, other sales and maybe HR stuff related to the product that you sell. Like if you sell a product or a service, quantifying that, it's so important. So where is all that data hiding? A lot of people don't even know where it is. Well, for social media data, those social media companies actually store it on their company servers. And I'll talk about what a server is in a second. But Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of them have their own servers that store your company's data. So for example, when someone views a video on your company Facebook page, that gets stored as a row in a database somewhere. It looks like this little table here. So you can see each of these rows would be someone viewing a video on your page. You can imagine how quickly that racks up, especially if you have a very active Facebook page, and then Facebook stores this for millions of organizations. So it's a lot of data. That's a server. That's what you're looking at. And it looks like one of those old CPU boxes, right, from an old desktop computer. I mean, we still have desktop computers, but you know what I mean? A lot of people have laptops now. There's no monitor, there's no mouse, there's no keyboard. It's literally just a box that sits there. And the whole job of that box is to stay turned on 24/7 and store your data and stay on so that you can access it, or anybody can access it if they want it. So the most common method for accessing that data on that box is called an API. You maybe have heard of that term. It stands for Application Programming Interface. And that requires a developer. You need somebody who can write code to extract the data from the box, but that's the best way usually to do it. I mean, that'll give you the most access to the most data, and it'll come in the cleanest format. And that's really like the proper, that's best practice way to do it. If you can't hire a developer, or that's not in budget, or you're just kind of not sure where to start with that, a lot of the platforms will actually also allow you to download your data as like a CSV file or Microsoft Excel file. Usually they don't give you as much though. They will give you less data than you would get through the API. And it's obviously not automatic or programmatic. Like you have to go in and manually download it every single time you want it, whether it's every day, every other day, every week, whatever. So in the long term, that's not a great solution, but it's pretty good short term if you're just trying to get started with accessing the data, whether it's you or somebody else. And once you have that data, there's a couple different places that you can put it. You can keep it in Excel files. This is, again, not a long-term solution. If you want to start out that way, that's fine. But eventually you're going to have too many Excel files, or your data is going to get too big for Excel. Excel has a limit. Anybody know the limit for Excel in terms of number of rows? Oops. I'm looking at the chat. Anybody happen to know off the top of their head? No guesses? Okay, I can tell you it's about 1 million rows, 1,048,000. Okay, so we had a guess of several thousand. Good guess. But no, yeah, it's closer to 1 million, but it sounds like a lot, but it's not. And then it'll start to slow down once you hit several 100,000 rows too. So Excel is not a long-term solution for storing data. Really, the best solution, especially once you get to, I would say even small businesses, but beyond like very small, is a SQL database. That is what 95% of people are using. The really big companies are usually like specialized programs, specialized databases. And you don't even necessarily need those. A lot of them are based in SQL. SQL is really the gold standard. And you might have heard that term. It stands for structured query language. And it looks just like we saw up here. It's just tables. It actually looks a lot like Excel, but it can hold way more records. It's a lot faster than Excel. You have to use code to get to it. So it's a little bit harder, but it has more benefits. So in the long run, it's worth it. So that's what you want to do with the data once you get it. And I won't go over this slide in too much depth here, but you can take my word for it. There's many advantages to having the raw data if you can. Later in the presentation, I'll talk about, well, what do you do if you don't even know where to start with all this? Maybe you don't want to be the one that collects the data, figures out how to store it, and does all this. You want some other application to do it, or another person to do it. Of course, a great starting point is anything, right? Any amount that you're looking at your data and doing something is fantastic. But in the long term, having access to the actual raw numbers, these actual tables with every single click, every single row, really is better for a bunch of reasons. I mean, you can do anything you want once you have that. You can fix errors in any way that you want. A lot of these programs that are preset, for example, they don't know your company personally. They don't know how you operate. So there might be like stuff in there that you would say, oh, this person actually, bought this other product or clicked on this other thing, and it really makes more sense to code them this way instead of that way. But you can't really do that unless you have the raw data. So there's many advantages, but that, again, long-term goal would be to get everything as it is. So another Michael Gerber quote: most businesses are not doing enough quantification, right? So then how do you actually analyze and quantify this data? Like, let's pretend you have it now. You've got it in either the Excel files or ideally the SQL database. You or somebody else has put it all there. What do you do? Well, before I get into how to analyze it, I would love another chat interaction here in the chat, because we don't have the polls up. What social media platforms does your company currently use? And then I'll talk about how to analyze data from some common ones. But I am curious if you all are using the same ones that I typically use. Oh, and I see a question came in, so I'll answer that too. But let's do the social media platforms first. Yeah, you could put multiple. Great, perfect, Catherine. Yeah, if you guys use multiple, do put them all. Great, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Okay. Okay, we've got Pinterest coming in, great. Oh, Swift page, I haven't heard of that. Okay, great. Instagram. Yeah, lots of, I'm glad there's lots of repeats, because thankfully these are the ones I have in the presentation. So, good. And Rhonda's question was, how do you customize your data collection? You might have to clarify this question a little bit for me, but I'm going to take a guess at what you mean is, right, how do you make it for your company as opposed to maybe something that would be generalized to, excuse me, all companies? And that's what I was kind of getting at with, oh, good, thank you. I'm glad, Rhonda. That's what I was getting at with some of these apps, like, and again, I'll talk about it a little bit later in the presentation, but like some of these apps that say, aggregate your data for you, they're not bad. Like it's totally fine, and it's a great starting point, but right, they're doing the same thing for everybody. So they are going to look at, I don't know, the number of men that like your page versus women, and what countries those people are from. And that's all great. And usually it does suit the purpose for most people. But yeah, if you want to customize it and say, I'm really interested, for example, in, and this is a question I get all the time, is how do I marry my social media data with some other data from my business, right? Like financial data or some other marketing campaigns I'm running, or whatever else. That's great customization, and that you have to do on your own. And that's why I was advocating, go get the raw data if you can. Because once you have the raw data, you can do whatever you want with it. I mean, of course, assuming you have the other data for what you want to do. But yeah, you can definitely take it, combine it with other stuff. I've had people combine it with census data too. That's a really neat thing that you can do, is say, well, where are the people who are logging into my social media Facebook page, right, and liking it and interacting with it? And then what are the census indicators for that zip code, for that state, that county, whatever. And that tells them a lot of information. So yeah, you could, once you have the raw data, you can totally customize it in almost any way imaginable. And then you'd have to use a program like Power BI or Tableau or even Excel to then analyze it. Just not one of those pre-built apps where they do it all for you. That's kind of the key to customization. So hopefully that answered the question. And again, like some of that is coming too, so that might answer it more. But of course, feel free to send a follow-up question if I did not answer it. So yeah, I'm really glad that you all picked some of the, or used some of the platforms that I have kind of worked with here and included in the presentation. I think the only couple that I don't have in the presentation, and I knew this one was coming, was Instagram. I knew a lot of people are going to go on Instagram. I don't have that in this presentation. I don't have Constant Contact. I see that one. And I haven't heard of that other one, that Swift, yeah, Swift page. Oh, it's an email program. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, I don't have that one either. I've worked with MailChimp though, actually, so probably really similar, but that didn't make it into the presentation either. So I'll just go over a couple, but you can get the point. I don't want to say they're all pretty similar because they're not. But I'll talk, maybe I'll even try to throw in kind of just a quick thing about MailChimp or the email programs, at least at the end. And then we did get another quick question. What access are we giving these social media data collection platforms to our own data by signing up? Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really popular question now too, is right, what is my privacy level with Facebook? Facebook has been a lot of hot water for that recently, right? Of like selling our data and all that. So I do not know, to be honest. I don't know the answer to that, but I know there's a lot of criticism out there of Facebook and Google for, yeah, basically they own your data. I mean, like you just heard, it's on their servers. They own it, they have it, they can do whatever they want with it. Just like you can access it, all of their employees can also access it and kind of do whatever they want to. So yeah, when you sign up, I'm sure we've all signed the agreement, and maybe some of you have read it, or maybe you're like me and you didn't read it, which is terrible. But Apple and Facebook and Google send you that agreement. You're agreeing basically to sign your life away to us and all of your data, and we all sign it, and they have our data now. But yeah, that's pretty much what happens is, they have access to it, and they're giving you access to your own data, but they have it too. Now, the good news is, of course, nobody else can access your data. Like I couldn't go in and get your company's data, but you can, and they can at the very least. And then if hackers get in, they can too. So, hopefully not. Okay, so let's start with Google Analytics. And I think a couple of you mentioned Google in the context of rating. And I know Google might not really be considered a social media platform, but I included it because it's a really good one and it's really important. And it's so easy to set up, and every business probably should be doing this if you have a website. You really should be doing this if you have a website. Not probably, you should be. So if you have any kind of website, it's like the easiest thing in the world to just connect it to Google Analytics. I don't even remember the process. I did it so long ago, but I remember it was like super easy. You follow like 3 steps and it will just start collecting data on your website. That's where it gets a little bit harder. Once you actually connect it, then you are responsible for going in, viewing the data and interpreting it, but it is the most robust of all of the platforms. Like this is the one platform where I would say to people, I and Boxplot, like my company could probably not add much value to this other than forcing you to sign in and look at it. Like it is really good. This is what a screenshot of Google Analytics, one of the options or views that you have in Google Analytics. Like they give you so much. Their charts are generally very good, very easy to read. They're really relevant. Like this is one where I don't think you need to hire a developer. I don't think you need to download your own data. I would just commit to going in, excuse me, and looking at it every week or so, and just trying to get used to what it's telling you and what you can do with that information. It is hard to get started and it looks overwhelming at first, but the point I'm making is you wouldn't need to really, like if anybody, I don't know, were to offer you like, oh, I can do all this in Google Analytics with your data, I would say no. I don't think it's worth the money. The only thing that you would really want to pay someone for Google Analytics is to like configure it and set it up. That's the hard part, is like, how do you apply the right filters and connect things like that I would pay a marketing person for. But in terms of the data piece, I don't see a huge need to extract the data unless you're a super large company and you're trying to do something very, very niche with that data, because they do such a good job. So you do have options though. I mean, if you really do want to get at the data, you can export it to Excel. You can go through their API, which is, again, you need a developer, and even for a developer, moderately difficult. And then again, you could just look at what they have. If you are going to do it yourself, or like I said, if you want to really try to get into it, you do want to, there are some like filters and stuff you would want to apply on the data, because it's just sucking in everything. Like when you go to your website and you're editing it, or your developer or your web firm is editing it, it picks all that up. You don't really want that information, right? You want people who are outside of your internal network who are going to your website. So you could do that. You can get demographic and interest reports. Like there's some settings that you would want maybe a marketing person to configure for you. You could do really crazy things in here. You could look at funnels and see like where do people, if you have an e-commerce site, where do they drop off? Where do they not get to the shopping cart? You know, whatever. Like that, it's a very robust platform. These are some of the questions you can answer with Google Analytics. How many people are visiting my site? Are they coming back to my site? Which pages have the highest bounce rates? That's a really good one, right? Which pages are basically failing on your website? What's the behavior flow? That's a little bit of a tougher one, but like, where do people go on your website? Do they start at page 1 and then go to page 3 and then back to page 2, you know, whatever the pages are. Where are my website visitors located? It'll give you a neat little map. I'll show, I think I have that in an yep, I do, upcoming slide. Is it converting people to buy stuff? And if so, at what rate? What are the top sources of traffic to my site? That's a huge one. Right? Who is sending traffic to my site and getting people there? Like, is it Instagram? Is it some other personal connection I have with a local business? Like, who's actually driving people to my site? And then what are top pages? So you could do stuff like this and say, oh, the bounce rate on my one page is really high. Why? Well, maybe you notice that 75% of the users who are using your particular site use it on mobile devices. And this is not the same for everyone, right? You might think, oh, well, everyone uses stuff on their cell phone now. Now, if you run like certain, like for Boxplot, I don't think we get a ton of people that look at it on their cell phone because we're a B2B services organization. Whereas a consumer company who's selling consumer products, you might have more people on a mobile device than I would. So maybe you determine that because they're all on mobile devices and your checkout page is not mobile optimized, that's why you're losing a lot of people. That's an easy fix, right? You get to hire somebody, tell them, make this mobile friendly, couple hours and boom, it's done. And maybe you get more sales. So it's a really great tool. It can tell you what time of day and what day of week people are going to your website. There's the map that I was talking about. The map is really helpful if you are an international business or trying to be, because you might want to translate your page right into different languages or something like that. But all of these usually have some kind of action item associated with them that you can you can do something to improve your business once you have this information. Not all of them. Again, if you're a local business, like for me, I'm not going to translate my website into any of these, you know, well, I guess most of the languages for my website are English anyway, but, you know, I wouldn't translate it because we do most of our business in the United States. So this is more just fun fact. But again, for an international business, this would be huge. Is what language do I translate my site into next to hit the most people or something like that? So some of them are more relevant to different people than others. But again, Google just gives you all this. It's really great. You can also find pre-made dashboards. People have made stuff that they think is more helpful than what Google already just kind of gives you out of the box. And some of them are free. I linked to one. I'm not recommending this one particularly. I'm just giving it as an example of, you can download templates basically. And they have a really good academy. They call it an academy, which is just a series of videos. And I do recommend it. Like if you want to get even remotely serious about Google Analytics, which again, I think everybody who has a website should, even just watching the first of these videos, like the first little session, you don't have to go through all of them, but the first one is really helpful and it'll tell you a lot of what I'm saying here and kind of a little bit more of how to just use it. Even just logging into Google is a big one. Okay, let me see if there's any questions that came up for Google before I move on. No, I don't see any. Okay, I'll check the chat again after, I'll try after each one. The other ones are not as long as Google. Facebook is next. Facebook literally just announced like a month ago that they're getting rid of their, I think their insights or their analytics. I'm actually not super clear on what they're getting rid of because and this is like a joke on the internet, they call everything insights and analytics now. So they have so many different options and products and some are paid and some are free. I'm not totally sure what they're getting rid of, but I access all of Boxplot's data and for my clients through the API. So I assume the API is still going to be there and you can always get your data that way. But I assume they mean that this is going away. And this is what you used to be able to see for your particular company page. Again, I could be wrong. It's very unclear to me what is actually going away, which of their products. But Facebook's, whether they have this or not, going forward, you would log into your company page on Facebook and you could see something that looks like this. You could already see this is not as good as Google, right? I mean, it's just all line charts. It's kind of just trends over time. Yeah, they have a couple other options on the side, but I always kind of considered this mediocre. Like this, I don't think their insights were very good. But if you take the data, the behind these, you can get a lot more. And that's what I've done. You can get like, they give you like 1,400 columns in an Excel sheet. It's, you can really get a lot and go a little bit crazier with it. And then you can answer more relevant questions, I think, than the questions that these line charts would answer. And again, these line charts might be going away. It's something is disappearing on June 30th. It's unclear to me what, but I didn't think these were that good anyway. And I assume it's this. So yeah, Facebook gives you a lot of demographic information too. What are the age and gender of the people who are looking at my page? Which types of posts perform best? And this is one that they were not including with their, default package. I think this is so important and I don't know why they don't, but when we dig into the data, we'll look at like, what are your users like the best? Because it's going to be different for everyone. Some users really like photos. Other people, it's all videos. They need videos instead of photos. Almost no one seems to want statuses anymore. That one hardly ever comes out on top. That's just, text. Or is it links to articles? Like, what do your users prefer more than others? And there's so many ways to measure that. Impressions, clicks, interactions, comments. You can decide what's most important to you. Are you trying to get more comments, which is like true engagement, or just people looking at it? And then who's looking at it? Is it people who already like your page? Is it new people? Which do you want? So you can get a lot of information from their data once you download it. But again, their in-app offering is not very good. Here's an example of one that I just said, of the people who reach or are reached from photo posts, how many already like your page versus how many don't. So I'm looking at these charts. If these were your actual charts, I would say if you're trying to reach new people, you should be posting links or photos, right? Because that's where the big gray pie slices are. I mean, the statuses are only going to reach people that already like your page at best, and it's probably still not great. So these are how you can make decisions on what do I post on Facebook? When do I post on Facebook? When's the best time to post on Facebook to get the most people? What types of posts or hashtags or whatever get the most likes or engagement? You can get a lot of really cool information out of this. All right, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to go on to LinkedIn. And I think quite a few of you mentioned LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And please feel free to find me, by the way, after the presentation. I will accept all invites. And LinkedIn is one of those ones that's also kind of, so-so. They don't give you a ton of options. And when I say sampling unclear, I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. Some of these platforms, when you get your data, it's actually sampled data, which can really throw people off. And Google does this. As much as I rave about their platform, people don't like that Google does this. They're not actually giving you everything. So sometimes people will call me and say, well, this is weird. The data on my Google Analytics doesn't really match the data that I have from an ad that I'm running or something like that. Like they're getting two different numbers from Google, but they're not matching, because what actually happens is Google Analytics samples unless you pay a lot of money. Yeah, so all of these are free, by the way. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. They're all free unless you want certain things, and in which point they do ask you to pay. Like with Google Analytics, if you want your true raw data, like true raw data, which you don't need, but if you ever did want that, it's a lot of money. I think it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the sampling is usually good enough. It's close enough. That's fine. With all the other platforms, it's honestly unclear to me if they sample. I haven't looked too much into it because I'm not bothered by the sampling, and I think most small businesses shouldn't be. It's really going to be close enough. If you're a super large organization, you might be bothered by that small difference, but I wouldn't worry about it. And then, yeah, LinkedIn doesn't give you any real, I mean, most of the others don't give you any configuration options. Like Google Analytics will let you, like I said, apply filters and move charts around and make your own dashboards. And the other ones just kind of give you what they give you, and that's it. And LinkedIn is somewhat helpful. You know, again, this is all accessible just by clicking on your page. And usually there's like just an insights button or analytics button. And if anybody can't find it, again, you can always like message me after the presentation on LinkedIn or wherever, and I can point you to it. But once you get there, it'll show you this. It's relatively nifty. Like, what are the job functions of the people who are looking at your page? What is the seniority level? People looking at your page, how many clicks and whatever do you get over time on mobile versus desktop? You can export this to Excel, and they do have an API. Their API is very difficult, and they hide a lot. Like, they don't want you to have a lot of the data. So they're unfortunately the most difficult of all of them. And you have to really want that LinkedIn data, I would say, to hire somebody or go after it, because it is going to be a pain and they're not going to give you everything that you want. So I would probably stick with what they have here, because when you download the data, I don't think you get too much more than this, unfortunately. They really have it locked down. I don't know why. I'm not sure what their reasoning behind that is, but it's very locked down. But then you could answer questions, like I said, what is the seniority level? How many impressions do I get? They even, I think, recommend comparable companies that they think you should be tracking as like competitors. So it's relatively nifty. And then, okay, great. No questions. But I see we got another message in the chat. I'm checking every so often. Yes, very cool. Very cool. Okay, great. Thanks, Rhonda. All right, Twitter. Twitter is also not very robust. It has an odd format. Like, if you log in and look at that analytics page, it kind of like gives you tweet by tweet, day by day type of stuff, which is really, you have to like scroll a lot. It's not really very helpful, I think. And I wouldn't like looking at it that way every day. That would drive me crazy. Again, sampling is unclear and you can't configure anything in Twitter. However, they do give you more through their API. And when you take their data from their API, which is also very easy to access, thankfully, this is the easiest one to access. If your Twitter profile is public, you can get the data from pretty much anybody with just their handle. So this is definitely by far the easiest one to access. And they will tell you really cool things. And then once you get the data, you can do even more cool things. Other than like certain things about your followers, which I think they might have taken some of these away, like the credit cards and the interests and the wireless carriers. But what's more important, I think, too, is which hashtags get me the most retweets, or which hashtags get me the most average favorite counts. Like, what should I be doing to get more engagement? They don't give you stuff like that. Like, these are charts I've made with the Twitter data, but you can get that if you get their raw data from the API. So their in-platform option is not great. It's okay. Again, it's better than doing nothing, but they give a really good gold mine once you actually download the data, if you know how to kind of manipulate it and see what is doing the, like you could see for me, for Boxplot, machine learning comes up as a top hashtag in both of these, I think, actually. Yeah, there it is in the retweets. So now I know that if I put out tweets, or Boxplot puts out tweets about machine learning, that'll give me a pretty good response rate compared to some of these other ones. Like, unfortunately, statistics is low on the list. Nobody's interested in, right, just statistics. It's got to be machine learning. That sounds more fun. Okay, let me check the chat. Any other questions before we kind of move on to, okay, now how do I, like, what are my options if I feel overwhelmed by all of this and but still want to get started? No questions. Oh, yep, one question. Twitter is hundreds of conversions as what time? At one time, isn't it? I don't know. What does that mean, Rhonda? Hundreds of, I'm sorry, conversations. Trying to have, yeah. I would love to hear everybody else's responses to that in the chat too, if that's kind of how you've envisioned Twitter. But yeah, I would say it's a lot of small little conversations coming up constantly. That I think that's pretty accurate. But the data will capture all that and make it more manageable and help you find patterns and that's why the data is so valuable. It cuts through all the noise and gets you to the patterns and what's kind of comes out on top. Alrighty, so I know that's a lot. And a lot of you might be like, oh my God, I've never heard SQL before in my life. This is just not seeming doable to me. Like, this is crazy. So let me just go over quickly what a lot of other people do for this. If you kind of are like, I don't think I can do this myself, it's not realistic, which is fair. Like, especially if you're a solo business owner, you've got enough to do, right? I know, like, we're part of a co-working space, and the co-working space guy is always saying that he cannot even convince people to log into Google Analytics on a daily, because it's just, they're so busy. It's so hard. Like, I totally get it. This is overwhelming. This is a lot. So there's a couple options that people will do for answering these questions. And this comes back to one of Rhonda's questions earlier. So the first one is apps. And like I said, there's so many out there. I mean, I listed a couple here. I think we're sending the slides out afterwards. There are links here to some of these, but these are just like 5 of probably hundreds, and they're all slightly different. And this is a great place to start if you really feel like you have no other options. I'm not saying these, again, I'm not like trying to downplay it or say these are bad. They're good, but this is what we were talking about before, where there's kind of no customization usually for these. It's just, they're going to give you what they do for everyone, which again is not always bad. We develop one of these apps. Boxplot develops one of these apps. Like, I'm not saying it's horrible. It's just depends on what you're looking for. So if you're just looking to get started and you say, I really just want to look at my data and try to make more informed social media decisions, then one of these apps might be a really good starting place. And they're going to ask you just to connect all of your accounts to the app, and they will either just display the information that they think is the most important for you to look at in their opinion, or some of them let you just kind of configure it yourself. If you're someone that's short on time and you're always, running, like I'm that way, I'm like a chicken with my head cut off every day, like trying to go through meetings or anything, you don't pick one of the ones that you have to configure yourself. Like, Databox is really great. They're really popular, but it's a lot of self configuration. Like, well, what chart do you want? And where do you want to put it? And what do you want to see? And some people really love that because they have the time and they want to go through it. But if you're someone that doesn't have that time, don't sign up for that. It's just going to frustrate you and you'll wind up quitting it. Pick one that just gives you the information and hands it to you. The apps are usually pretty cheap. It's usually some kind of monthly subscription. I don't know, $40, $50 a month, depending on how many things that you want to, how many social media platforms you want to connect, how often you want the data, all that. And again, they're a good starting point, but the con really is eventually you will hit a wall where you're saying, oh, I really want this metric, or I really want to do this with my data, but I can't because the app doesn't do it, or I can't combine it with some other data source, whatever. So those are the pros and cons of using apps. There's the DIY, do it yourself. And that would be kind of what I just described in the last section, where you're pulling the data, whether you're doing it through an API or just downloading the Excel files, trying to mess around in Excel, Tableau, Looker, Power BI. If you really know what you're doing, you can have a field day and it'll be great. But of course, the con is you really got to know what you're doing. It'll be a little overwhelming. Like I said, Facebook gives you, I think it's like 1,400 columns just by downloading it from Excel. So you got to have the patience to kind of go through and figure out which ones do I really need, which ones do I not need, et cetera. So that's another option. And I already kind of went over how to do that in the last section. You can get a consultant or outsource it to some kind of marketing firm or, somebody to do it. I mean, the con is it's usually more expensive depending on what you're asking them to do and how many apps you what data you want to get from different apps. But the pros are you're going to get exactly what you want, right? As opposed to the apps where they're just going to kind of give you what they think. You can combine data from different sources. You can have like a customized solution for your business. And this might be more relevant for those of you who said you have you're up to like 10, 15, 20 employees. Once you start to get kind of large enough that you start having those custom questions or want to merge it with other data, that's where that gets more useful. And then of course you can hire an employee to do this. The con of that, of course, is also can be very expensive. You have to pay someone a salary. And this is something I get calls for all the time. Finding the right person is crucial. Unfortunately, data analytics is one of those fields right now where there's a lot of people that say, I'm a data analyst, and they don't fully have the credentials, it seems, to actually know what they're doing. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying, because we get a lot of calls, like people will call Boxplot and say, I hired someone, they're kind of getting stuck. I realize now that they didn't have a ton of experience in this or whatever. Like you do want to be able to properly vet and interview the person that you're going to hire for this to make sure that they're not going to get stuck on SQL queries or kind of get to the data and we'll talk about this later in the presentation, but produce charts that are not useful or, God forbid, having you make the wrong decision too. Like you got to have somebody that really knows what they're doing. And that can be hard. There's a shortage of data analysts nationally right now. So, there's pros and cons to everything, obviously, but this is what most businesses do. One of these options, right? You buy an app, you try to do it yourself, you get some kind of consultant or firm, or you try to hire somebody internally, and they all have ups and downs. It really depends on like where you are and what you're trying to do. Again, depends on your goals. All right, let me check the chat for questions. What's the most affordable outsourcing? Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, if you mean like firms, they all have different prices. I don't think you could pay Google to do stuff like this. I think you would have to just kind of find a firm. Or a promising student in data analysis. That's a good one. I get students that reach out to me all of the time, and I'll try to find work for them, but I don't know how they find me. So yeah, I guess I'm sure like these internship sites or whatever. Again, that's the hardest part though, is how do you vet? Because I've had really good students and I've had really bad students. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to vet the person and ask them the right questions of like, what would you do if you had this situation? You're trying to merge two data sets, or tell me how you would write this type of SQL query. Like they need to, you have to ask the right questions in the interview, which can be really hard. It could be really hit or miss by individual. So it's a tough thing to do. But yeah, I don't know. I guess or even LinkedIn, like using your network on LinkedIn and trying to find people that way. Students find me though, I can tell you that. I get emails all the time. And I do try to give them internships and everything. Okay, great. So let's finish up here and then I'll leave time for more questions, of course, with analysis challenges. And this is kind of general analysis challenges that I've gotten in the past. And I'm just trying to help, if you do decide to go the do-it-yourself route, or even if you are trying to like work with an employee or something, just what you can expect. These are quotes I get all the time. It takes me weeks to solve a problem in Excel. I'm not sure where to start, or I know what I'm trying to do, but I don't know how to get the data to mold to that answer. I can't generate certain reports. I don't know that I'm confident in, like, these are things that I hear, again, I can do all these things. People call me and have these problems and say their employees are having these problems or they're having these problems. So these are like common things that you might face, which chart do I use? And it can be really challenging. And before I kind of go over, how to avoid some of these, I would love to hear in the chat if any of you have faced any of these challenges. If so, what are your biggest analytics challenges? And I had some options for this. So I'll just kind of throw some ideas out there, not to sway you, but just as a reminder, because again, these are the common ones that I get are like, which chart do I use? How do I turn my question into an analysis with the data? Or I don't know where to start, what questions to ask. That's another big one. I'm stuck doing a VLOOKUP in Excel. So again, not to bias you, put it in the chat what your actual challenges are, but stuff like that. Like if you've tried analysis, what have you faced? Yeah, great, Jerry. And that's the one that I said the co-working space still tells me every day that nobody even knows where to log on. Anecdotal. Yeah. That's a good one, Rhonda. Yeah. You don't even know where to start. I hear that all the time. Yeah. And people do, they'll spend their whole, you see business people spend a lot of time on anecdote and gut and intuition. And I don't want to, downplay that, because I'm not saying it's not important. As the business owner, of course, you do have, a feel for what's going on. But yeah, the data, I think, is more valuable. Anybody else? Anybody else like struggle with charts or, right, how to get the data? Or usually the one I hear the most is, I know what I want to do. I know the questions I want to answer for my business, but I don't know how to use the data to answer them. Nobody has that problem? Hard to compete against Google Ads. Okay. It's an interesting one. Yeah. Okay. And maybe a lot of you haven't done analysis yet, and that's why you're here, and that's totally fine. So I think we got enough answers. Well, the top, again, the top pitfalls I see to, like, once people do start, is misinterpretation, making sure you're actually looking at the right metrics for the right questions that you're trying to answer, limited views, you're not formulating the right questions, or you're formulating a question but trying to answer it with data that doesn't actually answer the question. I see that a lot. Like, people will say, well, I want to understand how ads perform in, this is a silly example, this is a fake data set that people use a lot, New York City taxis. But then they only have information about the fares for the taxis, not the ad performance. So they'll like do this whole analysis on the fares, like how much people are paying the taxis, but not, it's kind of extrapolate it to the ads, and it kind of doesn't work that way. And that's kind of the same thing as this third bullet point of extrapolating. You don't want to just kind of like make these grand jumps and assumptions in what you have. And then, of course, not having enough time. That's another big one I hear is, people will say, well, and some people have the expertise to do it. They know what they're doing. They just don't have enough time in the day to get it done. And then it doesn't get done. So that's, a problem too. So in order to have a successful analysis at a basic level, you need to know what you're doing and have time at the very least. There's all these other issues too. But one of the ones that I like to really go over is data visualization, because it's a really fun and easy way to see how these pitfalls can happen, because it's so visual. And I always kind of like to warn people, not just with visualization, but with any analysis, the worst case scenario for this, right, is that you take an action that actually hurts your business. Like, if you do this wrong, not to scare people, but it's true. Like, if you come up with the wrong analysis because, again, like, counts went wrong somewhere, you're using the wrong variable, you're extrapolating, whatever, you could take a decision that actually hurts your business. And if you're doing something wrong, the best case scenario is things stay the same and you don't hurt the business. I mean, the best case scenario is you're doing it right, and then you take an action that helps your business, right? So I'm only focusing on the negative for these next slides, unfortunately. But of course, there's always that positive scenario if you're doing it correctly. But let's say you're doing it wrong, and kind of see how things can go wrong. This is an example of a bad visualization. And someone might look at this and say, well, why is this so bad? And I actually took this from a book written by Naomi Robbins, who's a local Philadelphia author. And at first glance, it doesn't look too bad. But take a look at that top line that's labeled C and the bottom line that's labeled R way down here. They are on vastly different scales, right? This one is up in the hundreds, as high as 200. This one is pretty close to 0. So when you plot two variables that are on vastly different scales on the same chart, you're going to flatten one. It's going to look like it's totally flat. Sometimes that doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. Like, if you were to plot this by itself, where I'm pointing to with the red arrow, that's that same flat line that you just saw in the previous chart. It is not flat. There are definitive peaks and valleys there that we would have totally missed if we did it this way. That it appears flat because of the way we plotted it with everything else. But when you separate it out properly like this, you can see it's different. And obviously, for something medical like this, that would be a big deal, right? You want to know if it's fluctuating. Now, for social media data, maybe it's not as huge of a deal. Like maybe you're trying to compare your Twitter followers with your Facebook followers. And if your Twitter followers are a lot less, maybe it doesn't matter if the line is flat. You kind of just want to know that. But if you're trying to look at trends of like, are my Twitter followers increasing or decreasing seasonally or something like that, you would lose that information if you plotted them on the same chart. Here's another example. And area graphs are usually just kind of generally no good because they show one-dimensional information in 2 dimensions, which why is there a second dimension? It doesn't exist. So someone might look at this top one and say, whoa, that looks like exponential growth. But if you plot it on just a normal bar chart, which I know some people think they're boring, but they tend to be the most effective for this type of data, doesn't look quite as dramatic. So sometimes you can dramatize things a little bit with charts too, unideally. And then finally, people love these. People love these, and I hate these. These are no good. You don't typically want to put a line over a bar chart unless you have time on the x-axis. Line charts are almost exclusively for time. And there's just so many problems with this because first of all, there's no trend, and this is obviously fake data from the sitcom The Office. There's no trend between Dwight, Jim, Michael, and Pam. Dwight is not before Jim, like 7 a.m. is before 8 a.m. or Monday is before Tuesday. Like lines are for some kind of progression. So that's first of all. And the second of all, which line goes with which axis? We don't know, right? I mean, you could guess, but they're not labeled. Like, is the line on the right or like with the right axis or the left axis, or the bars with the right or the left? And then if the line is with the left axis, right, the lower numbers, well, here it looks like it's higher than this bar, but this number is actually way lower than this side. Like this would confuse someone so easily. This is a big no-no. You don't want to do this. Typically what I tell people when they're in this scenario is go to a scatter plot, split the charts up, do something else, but don't put them like this, because this will confuse people very, very quickly. So these are just some examples of, again, ways that you can kind of go wrong with analysis. And this is just visualization. Again, there's ways you can go wrong with pivot tables in Excel, calculations in tablet. It doesn't matter what you're doing. There's always ways to go wrong. So it can be challenging. But as you know, you have other options than I went over before. And I have some resources listed here. And again, I should have put my LinkedIn. I'll try to throw it in there before I publish this, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer quick questions, just no problem at all, and connect with people. There's some courses I listed here too, if anybody's interested in courses. I don't know if that's kind of something this group is interested in. There's some free training too. So there's a lot of ways to get started, but that is all I have. And I see there's stuff coming in for the chat. So let me see if there's any questions that have come in. In-house social media marketing, how does it compare with Google? Yeah, I'm not as up on the marketing. I noticed a couple of you were mentioning marketing a lot in the chat. I don't do like the marketing piece. And like when we were talking about Google Analytics, I was saying, for the configuration, you might want to hire an actual marketing firm because I only do the data piece. But if I understand correctly, I guess like the in-house social media marketing would be if you have somebody employed that is writing your social media posts, tracking all of that, doing it. I don't think it competes necessarily with Google. Like, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, I don't think Google actually offers any kind of services to you. I think it's really just like you can run ads on Google, you can see your analytics on Google, you can manage your business page on Google, but they won't like do stuff for you. Like they won't give you the interpretation of your ads, or they won't tell you, hey, this is like better than that type of thing. That would be like more of an in-house specialist or a marketing firm. I know this is a lot in a hurry. I feel you, Rhonda. Yeah, data can be, I get this all the time, unfortunately. The data is overwhelming. It's a lot of information, but again, you can always reach out to me. Okay, so Tanya asked, how is the data analytics I get from my Squarespace website different from the data analytics I would get from Google? Oh, that's a great question, right? Because Google has competitors. There's a program called Woopra. There's a lot that will give you the analytics for your site. Theoretically, they should all be reporting about the same numbers if they're reporting the same metrics, but they all probably claim to do slightly different things. Like, for example, I think Woopra will actually track by person. Like it tries to tell you who is looking at your site, whereas Google keeps it all anonymous. So there might be like small differences like that. If the numbers are vastly different, though, something might be going wrong. Like that's a situation where I would say, okay, maybe you should get someone in there before you make decisions on those numbers. I would have both though. If Squarespace is giving you numbers, and you obviously can get them for free from Google Analytics, I don't see any reason not to have both and compare them. And then, yeah, if they're different for the same metrics, like make sure they're giving you the same information, that's when you'd go, yikes, maybe I should figure out what's going on before I make a decision on these data. But yeah, Squarespace probably gives you something similar, or maybe they have some proprietary thing where they can give you more information. I don't know, but something like that. Great. Any other questions? General Assembly. Yeah, I actually used to teach for General Assembly. So yeah, they're pretty good. They're pricey, but they're a good one. They're on I have their link here. Udacity is another good one. I've taken Udacity classes. I can recommend them too. They're really good. So yeah. Great. Are we out of time, Nikki? Is it 50 minutes or an hour?
We are not. We have a hard stop at 10:25.
25. Okay, so we have 5 more minutes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I accidentally posted the links for the next session.
Oh, no problem. Any other questions? And I mean, I don't mind if people unmute, but I know that I think everybody might still just kind of be muted. And Nick, you didn't need to show these two or these last slides here? No, you're good. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, you can have those up. That's great.
Any other questions? And again, you can find me on LinkedIn after and ask a question. I really don't mind. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. And thank you to all of the participants who joined us today. We will be sure to include Barbara's presentation in the follow-up email that we send to all of you in the next couple of days. I posted in the chat the links for the other workshops that will begin promptly at 10:30. If you're interested in staying for the Building Marketing Resilience workshop hosted by Robin Colder, you can just stay right in this Zoom room. She's on early. Hi, Robin. I see you waving. You can just stay right in this Zoom room. If you're interested in joining the contracting workshop that deals with turning MWBE certification into procurement, I shared that link. You may have to, enter your email and your password again to join that Zoom. I hope you guys don't mind. Unfortunately, we did that for security reasons. There's also another workshop happening at 10:30, Empowering Diversity, and that's about social entrepreneurship going beyond traditional business. So that link is in the chat box as well. And if no one has any other questions, we can end about 3 minutes early and just have enough time for a quick bio break. And hopefully some of you will stay on and join us for Robin's presentation next. Thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to log off. See you later.
All right. Have a wonderful day.